everybody. Welcome to the AJRedRaiders.com pregame show brought to you by UMC Health Systems. I'm Don Williams from the Avalanche-Journal alongside our sports editor Nicholas Talbot, where we are going to break down for you Texas Tech against Oklahoma State, 2:30 p.m. kickoff on Saturday out at Jones AT&T Stadium. It's a home game again for the Red Raiders in this stretch where they've played 3 out of 4 on the road. Oklahoma State comes into this one as a 3-point favorite. Red Raiders trying to deal the Cowboys their first loss of the season as they are 7-0 overall and 4-0 in the Big 12. Texas Tech coming off a loss to Oklahoma last week, 63-27 up in Norman, and the Red Raiders are happy just to be done seeing Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, Nick.
Yeah, they really should be. Perine, of course, ran for 201 yards and Mixon 154. The good thing about this game, though, maybe it'll give the Red Raiders defense a little bit of a reprieve. Oklahoma State does not run the ball that well. They're only averaging 3.8 yards a rush, something David Gibbs pointed out during the press conference, although he said pretty much anyone can run against them. Even Gibbs doesn't have confidence in his run defense at this point, and the numbers kind of say that he shouldn't. But if they're going to excel in a game, it's going to be this game, Don. Right now, Oklahoma State's ranked 100th in the nation rushing offense. They're only averaging 146 yards a game.
No running back with even 400 yards so far.
No running back with 400 yards. Right now they have 3 running backs that combine for 818 yards, which is Ronnie Childs, Chris Carson, and Raymond Taylor. So they kind of have a 3-headed monster going on, but even then it's not that productive. If you want a comparison, DeAndre Washington already has more than that. He has more touchdowns. He has more rushing yards. And on top of that, of course, Justin Stockton has another 300. Patrick Mahomes has 7 rushing touchdowns. This is one game where they have the advantage. Texas Tech is actually the better rushing team. I know that's hard to believe for people out there. It's not exactly something we can say very often.
Well, DeAndre Washington usually does a good job, but Tech defense usually allows someone else to run.
This is true. This is true. Tech is actually getting better at running the ball, and they're better than they were last season. But yeah, very few often we do say, hey, Tech is the better rushing team. That doesn't happen very often. This time, it's a reality. The Red Raiders, if they're going to make any big strides, this is the game to show they can actually stop the run if they can. That remains to be seen. 405 to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma wasn't actually having that good of the season on the ground. They have 2 of the best backs in the Big 12. The offensive line play had not been solid, hadn't been blocking very well for them. But against Red Raiders, it looked like I could have ran through some of those holes, at least for 2 or 3 yards. Whereas, Mixon was getting 45 at a chunk. But, Don, but there are a lot more keys to this game. It's not just about the running game for Tech as much as we've harped on it and as much as the Red Raiders need to improve, Don. What are some of the keys you see coming in?
Well, I think first thing for me is Texas Tech's got to have some solid offensive line play, which you thought going into the season, really you thought going into the last 2 seasons, I guess, that the offensive line play would be something that was solid and reliable, something that you could depend on. And for the most part, it has been. But for the past 2 weeks, we've seen some chinks in that armor. With Patrick Mahomes being sacked 5 times up at Kansas and then 4 times at Oklahoma. Talked to some of the guys on the offensive line this week, and they said, yeah, they were a little bit down in the offensive line meeting room the last few days, but they also realized that they have to put it behind them quickly. They're experienced guys. They played a lot of football and go out and execute their assignment and technique. A couple of issues with that, though, are, in the Baylor game, 4 weeks ago, you lost Justin Murphy, your starting right guard, to a season-ending knee injury. Last week, Baylon Brown limps off the field with a knee injury. He is day-to-day. Cliff Kingsbury said this week he will not need surgery on that knee. And he is one guy, kind of like Raven Clark, who they feel like he's played so much football that even if he does not practice a lot this week, if he is ready to go on Saturday, then he will play. But that's when you add in the fact that Brown played right next to Justin Murphy, you have one guy missing on the right side and another guy iffy on the right side. So that presents some issues not only with the running game of DeAndre Washington, but again with that pass protection, which is key. And the reason why it's key is because Oklahoma State, with, of course, 2 of the best pass rushers in the Big 12 and really nationally as well, with Emmanuel Ogba and Jimmy Bean.
Yeah, and Ogba's been really strong this season. He had 10 sacks during his sophomore campaign when he got the 2014 Defensive Middle Line of the Year. This season he's already been credited with 8 sacks through 7 games, so he's actually improving. And another guy to look out for is Jordan Stearns, who's been very solid this year, averaging 8.1 tackles a game.
I think he's trying to lead the Big 12 in tackles for like a couple of years in a row, although
Yes.
Dakota Allen actually has more tackles than he does. Interesting story about that is Jordan Stearns is another one of those guys from Cibolo Steel, like Justin Stockton, who played high school football, if I remember correctly, at least part of his high school career, for Mike Jinks at Texas Tech, and I think was originally maybe committed to the Red Raiders before he flipped to Oklahoma State. He's turned into a big loss for Tech.
Yeah, it has. He's had a great season, and really, you wouldn't think Oklahoma State's going to be one of the top defensive teams you're going to face just based off history. But this year they have, 3 guys that could alter the course of this game.
Dan, that's the thing that jumps out to you. One of the other things that jumps out to me about Oklahoma State, the Cowboys allowing only 19 points per game. Now, I don't think they're a defensive juggernaut, but they haven't been. They have not given up those 30 points, except just in one game. That was against Kansas State. So I think because of that, it's a team that I don't see this really being necessarily a shootout game between the Red Raiders and the Cowboys. And that's one of the other keys for me. Another key for Texas Tech to be able to win this game is they have to defensively. We talked about the run game, but they have to just defensively have to limit big plays. Oklahoma State big played the Red Raiders to death last year up in Stillwater in a 45-35 game, primarily with the passing game last year. Oklahoma State had 5 big completions longer than 25 yards, and 3 of those went for touchdowns. So guys like J.J. Gaines and Nigel Bethel and those guys on the back end had to limit that on Saturday.
Right, and that's one thing they could possibly do because Mason Randolph, while he hasn't been horrible this year, he's been almost average kind of for Oklahoma State quarterback. He's throwing for about 313 yards a game. The offense is getting 40.3 points a game, which are great numbers. But things you got to look out for is he's only throwing 10 touchdowns, so some of those big plays aren't coming from his end, and he's already thrown 7 interceptions. So it's very possible that this Red Raider defense, which is really getting good at taking away the ball, especially with Gaines and Johnson back there in the last few weeks, that they really have some opportunities. That Randolph is key to make those mistakes. Much like Mahomes did last week, they might be able to have one of those games against him if they can really press him and get some pressure on him, which the Red Raiders have struggled with this year.
Sounds like you're saying whichever quarterback plays better could have something to be another key to this game.
Geez, imagine that. A quarterback play could determine a game. It's like saying turnovers could determine a game, right? I'm sorry to make it so simple, but this game could be, simply come down to that. Who plays better, Mahomes or Randolph, and who turns over the ball less? Mahomes has been good at it, except for Oklahoma. 4 interceptions, of course. Of course, those were all his fault. Eric Stryker, of course, made a ridiculous play on a ball, and then a couple of their balls were kind of tipped there. So, Mahomes has to be better, though, just for the sake of he wasn't strong against Kansas. He had 4 interceptions against Oklahoma. He has to prove that he has the confidence to be the guy he was against Iowa State again.
The confidence to be the guy that he was, first 5 or 6 weeks of this season.
Exactly, Don. And that said, what do you think this outcome of this game is going to be?
Well, Oklahoma State's favored by 3, and I think one of the tipping points here is Oklahoma State has won so many close games this season already. A lot of folks look at. I think most folks, if you don't live in Stillwater, Oklahoma, look at Oklahoma State's 7-0 record and say these guys are not that good. They're going to start losing some games sometimes. But they beat those 3 weeks in a row to start the Big 12 play. They beat Texas 30-27. They beat Kansas State 36-34, and then they won an overtime game against West Virginia 33-26. And then they also after that tough stretch where it's like close game, down to the wire, and they had an open date, and then they had Kansas. So I think I'm not sure this is a real good time for Tech to catch OSU, just because the Cowboys have had time to kind of come down off of those tense games and a couple of weeks to kind of refresh and rejuvenate. I mean, an open date in Kansas, that's as easy a 2 weeks as you can have. So I expect Oklahoma State to come back in here refreshed, and I think it'll be a close game. But then another factor here is you have Oklahoma State with Ben Grogan, a kicker. He made a game-winning field goal to win the Texas game. He made a game-winning field goal to win the Kansas State game. I believe he kicked a game-winning field goal against Oklahoma last year. So this is a guy who, if it comes down to the wire, you have a guy who's made a bunch of pressure-packed kicks for the Cowboys. Say that 3 times fast. And I think that it could very well be another one just like that. I think Oklahoma State stays undefeated on Saturday, 38-35 against the Red Raiders.
38-35, you're going right with the line. Well, guess what? I'm going with the upset special. I'm just going Texas Tech. I like their matching up just based on the Oklahoma State's inability to run the ball. If they can't score 40 on Tech, Tech's going to get 40 at home. They might get 50 at home, especially if Patrick Mahomes can really turn the corner. And that's kind of the way I'm going to see this game. I'm going to pick it 3 points the other way, Don. I'm going to go 38-35 Tech. I'm just mirroring your score and flipping it. I'm trying to get some more fans here for myself. No, I actually think Tech really has a good matchup. If they're going to win and make this bowl, if they're going to go 6-6 or they're going to go 7-5 and make a bowl, they need one of these wins. They need Kansas State. They need Oklahoma State. The best chance they have to do it is at home. And I think the matchup is here for them to do it. So I'm going to go 38-35 Tech.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, said it here first.
Red Raiders 5-3 right now, and you touched on something again. Four games left in this in the regular season. You have Oklahoma State this weekend, then you go that road trip to West Virginia, then Kansas State and Texas. I think all of those teams are beatable from a Texas Tech standpoint, but there's no gimme in that group. So
there's none at all.
So
really.
the longer you go stuck on 5 wins, the more pressure there becomes to get yourself bowl eligible. So.
Yeah, and I think they might get it out of the way here because I don't know if they match up well against West Virginia, and they don't really match up that well against Texas. Texas runs the ball pretty well. West Virginia has a great secondary. I think this is the opportunity, and Texas Tech needs to realize it. This is the game they can really turn the corner and really get some momentum for the rest of the season.
Well, we'll all see what happens on Saturday, and, of course, leading up to Saturday and then on game day. We want you to keep it tuned to redraiders.com for columns, features, stories, full game coverage, notebooks, you name it. It's all here on redraiders.com and LubbockOnline.com. For our producer, engineer, our photo and multimedia editor, Mark Rogers, and for AJ Sports Editor, Nicholas Talbot, I'm Don Williams from the Avalanche-Journal. This has been your redraiders.com pregame show brought to you by UMC Health Systems.